Hi there, I'm Michelle the Painter from Berkshire Paint and Sip, and this is Paint and Sip at Home. Alright, so today I'm going to be painting Lotus and Dragonfly, and I'm sipping on some green tea. And if you enjoy this process, I do hope that you like and subscribe to my channel, and that you also check out my Patreon page where you're going to find additional painting perks. So let's get painting, and let's get sipping. Alright, so for my materials today, I'm going to be using a stretched and primed 16 by 20 inch canvas. If you're painting along with me, you can certainly switch up the size, but that's what I'll be using. I'm going to be using acrylic paint today. My colors are titanium white, cobalt blue, Mars black, burnt umber, which I like to call brown, green oxide, chrome yellow, chrome orange, and magenta. And of course you can switch up those colors if you'd like, but that's what I'll be using. For my tools today, I have a white piece of chalk that I'll be using for some drawing, and then I have 3 brushes. I have a 1/2 inch wide flat bristle brush, I have a number 8 round synthetic brush, and I have a number 1 round synthetic brush, and I will refer to these as small, medium, and large as we go through the painting process. And of course you can switch those up as well if you'd like. If you're painting along with me, you'll probably want to have a cup of water for washing your brushes, as well as a paper towel for drying your brushes. And down below this video, in the video description, I will be providing you with a couple of additional resources that can help you throughout your painting process. One of them is a link where you could purchase the same exact paint kit that I'm using, from the same type of canvas and size to the same paints and brushes and all the good stuff in between. So that's there. There's also a link where you can download a free image of the final painting. So you can print that and use it as visual reference as you go through the painting process. And there's also written step-by-step instructions down there for you as well. And that's all we're going to need today. Alright, so what we're going to do for the first step is we're going to be painting our background. I'm going to be using my large bristle brush. The colors I'm using are blue, black, and white. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make myself a darkish, medium kind of natural, neutral blue color, and I'll be using that as the base color for the entire canvas. So I've magically pre-mixed my color so you can see where I'm headed. This is the color of blue that I'm going for. So how I got to this was I took my cobalt blue and I added just a little bit of black. You don't need to add a lot of black because the black will take over very easily. So you just add a little bit at a time. And same thing with white. I'm going to add just a little bit of white. So what I'm in essence doing is taking black and white, that makes gray, and I'm mixing it in with my blue. So I'm desaturating my blue a little bit so it becomes a more natural color. So this is in the vicinity that I'm headed. So once you've got the color that you're looking for, what you're going to do is you're just going to paint the entire canvas with that color. So you may find that during this process the color ends up being a little streaky or has some light spots or dark spots to it, which is completely okay in this step because we are going to be doing an entire second coat on the whole water area. So you don't have to worry about this layer being imperfect because you're going to be adding a lot of other information on top of it. So as you're going through this process, just enjoy painting, enjoy getting that base coat on there. You could certainly use a bigger brush than I'm using if you wanted to take a shorter amount of time, or you can use a smaller brush. You can use whatever brush stroke that you want as you're going through this process, again, because it's not going to matter in the big picture because we're going to have so many additional things on top of this. We're just looking to get a nice base coat that's going to help us through the painting process and give us that tone of color that we're going to want underneath all of our other elements that we're painting. So what you also could do is you could paint the edges or the sides of your canvas while doing this base coat, because that'll give you a nice finished look on the edges or the sides of your canvas. So you can certainly do that. And then once you've got this entire canvas colored in, you can certainly do a second coat if you want to, or you can just leave it as is. I'm gonna leave mine as is, so because I know again how many other things that we're going to be doing on top of it. But once you get this done, we are going to be using this same brush for the next step. So you can just wash it and dry it and get ready. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're going to be painting the base coat for our lily pads as well as the ripples in the water. I'm going to be using my large bristle brush. I do want to recommend before you start the step that you make sure that your canvas is for the most part dry. You can have little wet spots here and there, but this is that time where you get to take that extra long break if you'd like to. Or you can find some kind of fun fanning method to get it dry, or you can do as I did and just whip out a blow dryer and get it dry that way. So what I'm in essence going to do is I'm going to be putting my lily pads in place with just green paint. I really don't want my lily pads to steal the show, so I'm going to have them really in a loose impressionistic style, so that way as I'm building them in my water, I'm going to be using a carefree brush stroke, so they will kind of become a little out of focus. We'll be putting highlights and shadows to bring a little bit of detail into them in a future step, but I really don't want them to be 100% in focus because I want my flower to be the focal point. So these are just going to become background noise and just add to the ambiance of the painting. So I'm going to start with green paint, and I'm going to kind of just plan out where I want them. So I think I'm going to have one over in this area, and I'm just using green paint. Going to have some uneven edges to it. Maybe one comes out in a point. I'm going to predominantly be using a oval style of shape to represent these big huge leaves that are floating in this water pond of sorts. But you can mix yours up a little bit. You can have, one has a little ripply edge to it. A lot of the ones in this area are going to be covered by your beautiful flower, so don't feel that they have to be perfect. I'm really just kind of going for the essence of the shapes on them. I dropped some paint out there, so I rectified that. And I can have some smaller ones. I can have some that are overlapping one another, so if I want one to look like it's overlapping, I can just give myself the information right now. We'll be doing highlights and shadows, which will help to kind of delineate or define those two away from each other. But because we are working on a dark background, my paint does tend to be on the translucent side. So what's going to happen is as this green is drying, it will get a little bit darker, and it'll have some light spots and some dark spots depending on how thick the paint is. So if it's thicker in one area and thinner in another, this might end up a little bit brighter than that. So I use those type of that type of information to give myself some nice on-the-fly kind of textural and gradients of sorts to help myself play with the different values of the colors. So that's something that is a great tool to use during your painting process. Again, up here I'm using thinner paint, so it ends up being a little bit darker up in through here. And now that I've got them kind of placed where I want them to be, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start adding some ripples into the water. So I've got a little bit of the green still left on my brush. I'm going to pick up a tiny bit of my water blue and an itty bitty bit of white paint as well. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of do a second layer on my water utilizing blue plus a little bit of white, and this is going to give me the essence of these little ripples happening in between my lily pads. And again, I'm not looking to do anything perfect or make a ton of details in this. I'm really just looking to give myself a nice second coat on the water, as well as put a little bit of movement in it. So again, I just keep picking up my water blue plus a teeny bit of white, and I didn't wash my brush, so I might every now and again have the evidence of a little bit of green from those lily pads, which certainly could emulate a reflection of the lily pad. It could emulate maybe some neighboring grass in the pond. It could, you know, help to just give a little bit more information throughout this water, as if it's got some reflections and movement in it. And then as I get down towards this bottom, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm not necessarily going to make down here really bright. I'm kind of just looking to put a little bit more brightness up in the top, but I definitely want to make sure that I have a second layer down in through here. So just picked up some more of my blue, and then once I've got this done, I'd let it dry and see if there's any additional areas that I want to amp up, and if so, I would. But I do know that I'm going to be doing highlights and shadows for my lily pads in a minute. So if you know it's not as perfect as I want it yet, I'm not worried because I've got that other stuff to go. So I am going to be using the same brush for the next step. So once you've got your base coat of your lily pads and your movement in your water, you can wash and dry this large brush and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're going to finish our lily pads with highlights and shadows. So I'm going to be using my large bristle brush. The colors I'm going to use are green, yellow, white, black, and I might at times want to use my watercolor too, but if I use that, I'll let you know when I use it. So what I'm in essence going to be doing is adding little shadows underneath some of my lily pads. You don't have to do it underneath all of them, and you don't have to do it really firm shadow, but adding a little bit of shadow, and I'm going to be adding it on the bottom side of my lily pads. This is going to just give them a little bit of dimension and let them look like they're popping out of the water just a little bit, or sitting on top of the water. On these two, I'll probably just do a little bit here, but nothing on this one. So I'm going to use my big brush. I'm going to use a tiny bit of black paint, not a lot, just a little bit on the tip of my brush, and I'm going to just scoot a little bit of black underneath some of these lily pads. I don't need to do a lot, just a little bit in through here. I'm even just kind of using a dry brush technique, kind of rubbing it in a little bit so I have it kind of dissipating in some areas. Maybe I've got a bigger one over here. If you have a bigger one, that's going to indicate that the pad is up off the ground or off the water a little bit more, so that will give that illusion. And if you ever run into a place where you're like, ooh, that was just a little bit too much, you can certainly bring back some of the blue from the water, and you can kind of incorporate that into the shadow as well. So that's good. I think I'm going to put a little one underneath here, and again, I'm not doing much. I want this one to look like it's sitting on top of that one, so this is a great opportunity to put a little shadow on that neighboring lily pad. So I just kind of put the little remnants from my brush and just rubbed it into it. This one's going to have a little bit underneath in through here. I know that my flower is going to be over here, so I don't even really need to do much to this one, but you know, sometimes I just pay the same attention everywhere just in case my lily or my flower ends up in a different spot. Little tiny one down in through here. And then once you've got it in the way that you want, I guess I did do almost all of them. I guess this one gets a little one too. I was going to say you didn't have to do them all, but I guess I did all of mine anyways. It just makes them all look like they're going to pop out. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to wash and dry my brush because I want to put some highlights on these pads. So again, not looking for a ton of detail. I'm going to have these ones up at the top a little bit darker and the ones down at the bottom a little bit lighter. I'm going to be using green, yellow, and white on my brush to start. So green, yellow, and just a tiny touch of each. You don't need a lot, just a little tiny bit on your brush. And I'm going to just kind of rub it into the edges of the lily pads that I want to be the brightest. So if I want this side over here to have a lot of brightness to it, I'm just going to kind of put the brightness in that area and then just kind of rub it out into the rest of the lily pad. And again, I'm not looking for lots of detail on these. I'm really just looking for them to, you know, have a little bit of life to them, which is where I'm going to bring in this highlight, and to have a little bit of those nice natural colors. I just picked up yellow, green, and white again. I want this one to have some nice brightness to the edge. You could certainly put little veins or little bumps coming throughout the lily pad. If you want it to look like it's got some more detail, you could certainly do that. But again, I'm not going for much detail on mine, but if you want to overindulge on yours and have all that detail show, feel free to do so. I'm going to put a little bit of lightness over on this edge, and depending on where you feel that your light source is, then, you know, or how these pads are kind of laying in the water would depend on where you would want to put that highlight. As I go up further in through here, let me just make this a little bit brighter. As I go up further on my canvas, I'm going to be using more green because I want them to be a little bit darker up in through here. So I'm going to be using more green on my brush, a teeny bit of white, and a teeny bit of yellow. Because again, I want these ones to be a little bit darker, so I don't want them to be as bright as the ones down here, which means less white. If you use less white, you'll still get your highlight, but it won't be necessarily as bright as the ones down there. And just be carefree. You don't have to go in for full-on detail. You can just kind of rub these colors in. You can even use, like in an area here, this is where I'm going to pick up my water blue plus a little bit of white. You could make it look like there's some water sitting on the top of this lily pad. So you can really have fun with how much they're popping out, how much they, you know, have detail on them. If you want a little part to look like it is bumped up, you just put a little bit of extra highlight on it, and that will help to make it appear as if it's more three-dimensional. And then I would just kind of keep going through these other ones. Again, I know that I'm not going to have a lot of detail on these top ones, but a little bit just to make it look like it's got some highlight. So I just picked up a tiny bit of green and white. I dropped the yellow right now, so whatever, if I have a little bit of yellow on my brush, that's fine, but dropping the yellow is going to give me these highlights up top, but without that bright sunshine in it. So just a little bit of green and white right now is giving me the highlight that is speaking well to my painterly eye. So a little bit green and white, just added it on this edge in through here. And again, doesn't have to be the whole thing. Just kind of use your intuition and add these bits of highlights. If you feel like you went too much, add a little bit of green back into the equation. Again, you could also add a little bit of the blue back into the equation. Just keep tweaking it until you feel that you've got it well enough. You could even add, you know, some darkness if you wanted there to be a little bit more of that little split in the lily pad. So feel free to have fun with this. And once you've got it in the brightness that you want and the intensity that you want, we're going to be using our piece of chalk for the next step. So you can just put this large brush away, take out your piece of chalk, and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're going to draw an outline for our flower and our dragonfly. I'm going to be using my white piece of chalk, but you could certainly use anything that is visible to you on your end for drawing purposes. So I'm going to start with my flower first, and then I'll do my dragonfly after that, because I don't know where to put my dragonfly until I put my flower petal on, because my dragonfly is holding on to it. So we'll do that. I'm not going to be doing any fine-tuned detail. We're just really looking for a basic shape for this flower and its petals that we can paint in later. So I am doing mine, it's going to be sitting or standing a little bit out of the water. We'll have a little bit of a stem to it, but the flower is going to be huge. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a couple of markers. We'll connect those markers, and by the time we're done, we'll have a good shape for our beautiful flower. I do, again, recommend that your canvas is dry before you start this step. It'll be easier to draw on it that way. So the very first mark that I'm going to do is about 2 inches from the bottom of my canvas. So if you find the bottom, the center of your bottom, and come about 2 inches to the left and about 2 inches up, that's going to be my first marker that I put in place. The next marker that I'm going to put is up on the top right-hand corner of the flower. So if this is about center of your canvas somewhere in here, I'm about 2 inches to the right of that, and maybe about an inch, inch and a half above that. So somewhere in this vicinity is my next marker. And then my third marker is going to be over on this left-hand side of the canvas. If this is about halfway up or down, somewhere in through here, I'm in about 3 inches and just up, just a smudge, somewhere in through here is my third marker. I'm going to connect these 3 with a big, almost an oval type of shape or part similar to an oval or the bottom of it. So I'm going to take from up here and I'm going to come all the way down and connect to the bottom in through here. And then from here, just kind of come up and connect up into this corner up and through here. It doesn't have to be perfect. We're going to be making petals and all kinds of other stuff. So if it's, you know, dips in a little bit or out, that's totally fine. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to build my petals from the front petals to the back petals. So how I'm going to do this, I'm going to start down in through here. So right where I began, right here, I'm going to make myself a couple little markers in through here. And then I'm going to come about halfway up this side and in about a half of an inch to an inch. This is going to be my first petal. I'm going to just bring this down in through here, and then I'm going to bring it down in through here. I'm going to do a similar exercise over here on the left side. So about halfway up, or actually this one's going to be a little bit higher. This one's going to be almost up to the top of here, maybe about an inch below here, and maybe an inch, inch and a half into here. Then I'm going to just bring this down in a curved line to meet this exterior, and then I'm going to bring it down like this to meet this marker in through here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come about almost directly up from the center of here and almost about the same height as these two. This one looks a little bit higher than this one to me, but somewhere in this vicinity is where the next marker is going to go. And then I'm just going to connect this to about midway down this petal, and then midway down this petal. I'm going to add other little petals around this, so I'm going to add another little one over on this side. And you don't have to put your petals exactly in the same place that I'm putting them, but this will give you a good assortment of petals throughout the flower. I'm going to come up from here, maybe to right about here, give myself another little petal in through here. And again, yours don't have to be exactly where mine are, just building from the front and working my way back. I think I'm going to have another one in through here, so maybe somewhere like this and like this. I think I'm going to have one between these guys and through here, so like this and like this. And these flowers are just nice and round and cupped, so I'm going to put another one in through here, right about maybe here and here. And let's see, on this left-hand side, I think this is going to be the last one that I do on this side, so I'm going to connect this corner into a little way up this petal in through here, so maybe somewhere like that. And then over on this side, this one can connect into here, and then I'm going to do a couple on the back side of the flowers. So I'm going to have, let's see, I'm going to have one in through here. This one's going to connect down to these two guys in through here and in through here. Then I'm going to have another one over behind here, so right about here, connect it to there. And then this one will connect to here. And then I'm going to have a big one back here. So this one might be the tallest of them all. So maybe a little bit taller than that one. Connect it down to there and down to there. So that's going to take up the main part of the flower. I also want some petals coming out in the bottom. So I'm going to have a couple coming out the front and then some coming out the side. So I'm going to work on my front ones first and just work my way back. Similar to how we did up here, we worked from the front back. I'm going to do that to the same thing for these front guys. So I'm going to come over to the right of my center, maybe about an inch, somewhere in through here. And then if this is my center, maybe another inch or so over to the left. This one is going to be a petal that kind of shoots out in this direction. So I'm going to bring it over here like this, kind of come up and back over. So to give you a marker as to how far over to the left I went, I'm about halfway in this petal in through here. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come about halfway down here, going to give myself a little marker, going to come up here just maybe about a half of an inch to 3/4 of an inch in like that. This petal is going to be kind of laying down, and it's going to be way far out to about here. So then I can kind of just connect these. This one's maybe a little bit more pointy. something like, maybe this goes a little bit rounder like that. There we go. And then I'll have a couple on this side. I'm going to have a front one kind of in through here. So just starting in that little corner, coming here, maybe about an inch like this, just giving myself a round one there. Then I'm going to have another one coming up here. So this one will start right about here, and it's going to come up in here, right about here, and the point of it is going to be here. So this is about halfway up the flower is about where that point of that one is. And then just going to connect these in through here. And again, yours don't have to be exactly as mine. This is just a nice generic kind of display of the petals. And then the last one I'm going to do is going to be out to the right from this one and maybe a little bit down. I'm going to have this one kind of scooting in behind that one and then just kind of coming down and meeting, kind of disappearing in through there. Then I just need a stem because this flower is really close to us and we're just seeing the stem of it. It's closer to us than those lily pads. So I'm just going to give myself a little bit of a stem in through there. And then I'm going to give myself a really basic and simple outline for my dragonfly. I'm going to have my head right near this, the tip of this petal in through here. I'm going to have the body is going to be like a little oval shape that's maybe about an inch or so long, not long at all. And then my tail, I'm just going to kind of mark off my tail. I don't need to do any big details on it. I just really want to mark it off. So I'm about maybe 3 inches away from the edge of my canvas. And then same thing for my wings. I don't need to do any fancy detail. I just really want to have a plan in place as to where they're going to go. So I'm going to have my first wing coming out. They're all going to come out from the back. So somewhere in here, I'm just going to draw myself this big oval type of shape. So I am, just to give you a little kind of perspective, if this is halfway in my canvas, I'm a little bit to the left of that. Then the next wing is going to be just a tiny bit up and to the right of it. And again, just kind of marking them off. I don't need to do anything fancy. And then I'm going to have these wings going in this direction. So again, just kind of giving myself these long kind of oval type of shapes. This one's going to be a little bit down and to the right of this one, something like this. And that's all I'm going to do for my outline. I'm going to be using my medium brush for the next step, so you can do any little adjustments that you feel are necessary. Put your chalk away, take out your medium brush, and get ready for the next step. Alright, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're going to be painting the base coat of our flower and our dragonfly. I'm going to use my medium brush to start, but I'll probably switch to my small brush when I get to my dragonfly. The colors I'm using are brown, white, and black. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pre-mix myself a very light tan color for the base coat of my flower and my dragonfly, and I'll be using black for the base coat of my stem. So I've got my medium brush. I've already pre-mixed my tan so you can see where I'm headed. So how I got to that was I used a lot of white and just a teeny tiny bit of brown paint and spun it together. So you don't need it very dark at all, but you definitely want it darker than white. So I'm going to pull my whites next to it so you can see the difference between the white and the tan. So it's definitely darker than tan, but it's not super dark. So once you've got it in the shade that you're looking for, I'm going to use my medium brush and I'm just going to be painting in all of my petals with this base color. I am going to leave myself a little visible evidence of my chalk line in between my petals. So this way I know where each petal starts and stops. I don't need to leave a big gap between them, but I definitely want to, we drew them out, so there's no sense in coloring, in coloring them all the same color and losing that separation line. So I'm really just going to take my time and give myself that, leave myself a little visible gap between the petals. So when we go to color in all of the other details, I'll know where those petals are. And you don't need to do much. You just kind of leave just a tiny bit of you know, it with a little bit less paint as you're going right towards the towards that chalk mark. You can certainly go over the chalk mark, just don't use as much paint when you get right next to that edge. And I just kind of let up on my pressure a little bit on those edges, so that way I don't put as much paint, and it allows me to leave that little bit of a space between the two of them. So just let up off on your pressure, use the tip of your brush, and you'll still be able to see the difference between those lines. And if worst case scenario, if you lose a line, that's okay. You can always re-identify it when we go to paint in those petals in a future step. So again, I'm not terribly concerned about a perfect coat either. I'm really just looking to give myself a nice base coat that will work for the colors that I'm looking to put on my flower in a little bit. And you can see I'm just kind of slowing down. You could, I suppose, have done the whole flower in a solid color and then added these the separation between the petals on a future step, which is, I take that approach sometimes, but I knew that this was gonna probably make for an easier painting if we drew out the petals, because they are big, distinct petals. Sometimes when you're working on a smaller flower or a flower that has these really intricate, 100 little petals, it does make sense to just paint the whole thing in one base coat first and then start separating the petals. Like a rose, to me, is easier to just paint a solid color and then separate those petals out later. But because this one has such big, distinct petals, I thought that this would be a little bit easier of a process, so we can go through and do our highlights and our shadows and all that good stuff. And so after I get done doing this, the base coat to these petals, what I'll do is I'm gonna do my base coat to my stem, and I'm gonna do that with just black. I will be adding little bits of highlights and stuff on top of it, but I'm going to just do the base coat with black because it's kind of hidden underneath our flower, and I don't think it's got a lot of sunshine happening to it. So we're just going to do a nice dark base for it, and we'll add some natural colors on top of it. So I'm almost done here. And if your petals morph into a little bit different of a shape during this coloring in process or during this base coat process, it's okay. We've got so many details coming on top of it. It's all right that if they don't have the same exact shape as mine. And then I'm going to just wash and dry my brush. I'm going to hit the stem with some black. So just washed and dried my brush, making the stem in through here just a nice solid black color. And again, we'll add little highlights on it later, so it'll have its own identity and some life to it. And then I'm going to switch brushes to my small brush for my dragonfly. I'm going to do this with my tan color. I'm going to do my body first, just hitting it with the tan color, trying to keep that shape, give a little roundness to the head in through here, and then I'm going to hit the tail. So my tail, I'm going to have a little bit wider as it meets the body, and then it's going to go more narrow as it goes towards the tip. So as you're doing yours, if you feel that you want to leave some of that chalk mark because it looks too wide, or you feel that you want to adjust it at all, just leave the chalk mark, because you can always erase it later. Like I know when I go to the tip of this, I'm going to want mine to be probably a little bit more narrow than my chalk mark. So I will leave some of that chalk mark, and then I'll erase it after my paint dries. So that will allow me to, widen or narrow that line as I feel fit. I did do a little bit of a curve on the end. As I go to do my wings, I'm actually going to put a little bit of water. I put little droplets of water in my paint, so it's really nice and thin, almost like an ink consistency. So I can have this little bit of translucency to my wings. So I'm just going to kind of give myself a little bit of an outline where I have my outline with my see-through paint, like this, and then I'm going to just use a tiny bit of that of the tan with a little bit of water and just kind of give myself these little streaks within that wing. So I'm not doing much to the wing. I'm really just using some see-through paint. We'll put some highlights on it in a little while, but this is just giving me my base coat to them. And again, doing the same thing over here on this one, just a little bit of my watered down tan paint and giving myself a couple little streaks in through here. Going to do the same thing over on the other one. And then once you've got this done, we are going to be using, let's see, what are we going to use for the next step? We're going to use our medium brush for the next step. So once you've got this done, you can put this small brush away, take out your medium brush, and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're going to be adding the highlights and the shadows onto our stem and our petals. I'm going to be using my medium brush. The colors that I'm going to use are the tan that we created, brown, and white. And if I need to go into any other colors, I will. But we're going to be putting the color on the flower later, but right now we're just going to concentrate on highlights and shadows. So these petals are very delicate and they're translucent and they've got light passing through them. So I'm going to be creating these shadows. Some of the shadows are going to go in where the petal meets the base of the flower, and some of the shadows will also be maybe on the bottom side of the petal or on the inside of the petal. Some of these petals are cupped. So as I go through these, I'm going to kind of just go through one petal at a time. I'll start with my shadows and then I'll add the highlights. I am going to start with my stem first so we can just kind of get that out of the way, and then we'll move on to our petals. So my stem, I'm going to use a little bit of brown on my brush to start, so just a teeny tiny bit of brown. And I'm just going to kind of get the center of that stem a little bit wet. My brown is transparent or translucent, so it will see the black underneath it. And now I'm just picking up a teeny tiny bit of my tan color on top of that and just going to kind of rub it in. I'm just going for something that has a little bit of dimension on it. I don't need much detail at all on this stem. This is just making sure that it has its own identity and a little bit of form and shape to it, but I don't want it to steal the show. So that's all I'm going to do for that. My shadow color that I'm going to use for my petals is going to be my tan with a little bit of extra brown in it. So I've pre-mixed it here so you can see where I'm headed. All I did was I took a little bit of brown and added it to my tan color. So this is going to give me a darker version of my tan, and I'm going to utilize this as my shadow color. When we go to add the pink onto the flower later, we can deepen it if we need to, but right now just using a darker shade of tan. So I'm going to start at the bottom and give myself my shadow area. So this one, this particular petal, and this is where you can start to get rid of your gaps between your flowers or between the petals too. So this one's going to have a dark area in through here and also a little bit of a dark area down at the bottom. So once I've got my dark areas on there, I can certainly blend it into my tan, but we're going to be doing a highlight in a minute. So I'm going to leave that unblended for the moment. So I still just have my dark tan on my brush. This one's going to get a little bit of a shadow in through here, and I'm just going to pull it out towards the end of my petal. And I'm just going to go one petal at a time. We'll do this one in through here. This one's just going to get a little bit on this edge, over back on this side in through here. This one's going to have some on the exterior of its petals. So I'm just kind of starting at the tip and then just kind of pulling this down. And again, this is where you're going to start to remove those gaps in between. So if I've got a gap, I can certainly just kind of take care of it right now. And of course, as we go through the highlight process, that'll pop out a little bit more. So that's going to be that one in through there. And I'm going to have also a little shadow on the inside of this petal as well. So a little bit in through there. This one right here is going to get a big, huge shadow on this side, this exterior side of the petal. And again, just bringing that color all the way to the edge. Maybe this one can just blend a little bit. This one over here, I'm going to have this shadow is going to be from this bottom part, and I'm just going to kind of pull it up in through here. And again, starting to close those gaps. If you don't close them all the way at this point, that's okay. We'll get to that on our next step. I'm going to put a shadow inside this one in through here. And if you feel as you're going through this process that your shadow color is not dark enough, that's fine. You can always add a little bit of black to it to make it a little bit more of like a darker gray, which I might end up doing after this is settled. I might end up elevating my shadows a little bit more, but I'm going to just start with them like this. This one I'm going to have it coming in through here and then just kind of pulling it out towards the edge of this one. And again, a gap like this I'm going to take care of with my highlight when I get to this one here. So if you still have a little gap, no worries. This one back here, I'm going to have this one all the way to the edge of this petal, maybe sneaking back in between here, and then gonna just kind of rub this up this petal in through here. And then I'm going to do this one's going to get a nice shadow on the inside of here and maybe down at the base in through here. And yours again doesn't have to be exactly as mine. This one's going to be nice and bright. I'm just going with something that's going to give me some good dimension as I'm building my light spots. And you'll see as soon as I start putting the highlights on these petals, you'll be able to see how important these shadows that we're putting on right now will be. This one I'm just going to kind of bring this in through here, going to bring this up this edge and maybe leave a little bit of that edge on the lighter side. This one maybe just gets a tiny bit in through there. This one maybe a little bit at the bottom. This one's going to have a good shadow over here on the right side. And then this one's going to have a shadow over here on the right side. And then maybe this one's got a good one back in through here. So now that I've got the darker areas, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to wash and dry my brush, and I'm going to start using white plus my tan color if I need, my light tan, to blend it in. So I washed and dried my brush, and I'm just picking up white paint. And you could really start anywhere, but to just keep with our rhythm here, I'm going to start down at the bottom, and I'm just going to highlight the edges or the areas that I left for the highlight. So of course this one's going to get this brightness on the edge, and then I just kind of blend it out. I'm keeping that darkness in the center. This one's got a little bit of highlight over here on the edge, bringing it to, this is now where I can bring it to the chalk mark and get it to blend in with that shadow if I want to. If it's the outside of a petal like this, the highlight could be a nice firm line, but if it's on the inside like this, you could get it to blend in with that shadow on the inside. So this one over here is going to be on the little bit on the darker side, but maybe I've got a little pop of the edge of the petal popping up in through here like that, maybe just so I can close up my chalk mark in through there. And again, chalk you can always get rid of with water. So in through here, I've got a lightness on the inside of my petal. So this is where we're going to start seeing the insides of some of the petals kind of catching the light from wherever that light source is. So that's same thing with here. Wherever I left that light tan, this is where I'm going to start to add these bright highlights and get it to blend into that tan. And of course this was the inside of this petal, so I can just kind of work this into where I did have a little bit of a shadow in through there. So again, just my white paint. I'm going to start just kind of keep on keeping on with these highlights. So wherever I left that light tan, this is where I'm going to just start incorporating those highlights and getting them. If this is an exterior of the petal, I just kind of get it to blend in a little bit. Maybe it's got a little pop of a highlight over in through there. On this one, I've got a big highlight in through here. Start again working on closing my gaps. So I've got my white paint going to help to close this gap in through here. And then this is the exterior of this particular petal. So I'm just going to kind of rub it rub this highlight out to blend in with that darker area that I had established. And again, just a little bit more white paint on my brush. Going to hit this little guy in through here. And just so I can maintain seeing the difference between the two, I would just leave myself a little bit of a shadowy gap if I needed to. If not, no big deal. Picking up more of my white paint. And again, you can see it's kind of a repetitive process that I'm going through right now. I'm just looking for those, the original light tan areas that I left when I didn't, you know, during the shadowing process. And wherever I see those lighter areas, that's where I'm adding some of this white paint. And if I feel it's an exterior side of the petal, I can get it to blend in with that shadowy area. This over here, I feel this might be the edge of, like maybe this is cupping similar to this one. So if I wanted to leave this edge nice and clean, I could certainly do that. So that's the beautiful thing about these flowers is they have, you know, you can be looking at that petal from a different angle and you can be seeing, you know, either the side of it, or you can be full on seeing the whole inside, or, you know, you can see the profile of it. So knowing that you can see these petals at different angles really helps to have a little bit of leeway when it comes to painting them, because you know, you might be seeing it from a unique angle that allows you to see the white from the outside, or the brightness from the light shining through that petal. So it just provides a nice unique experience and a great lesson on how to paint these highlights and shadows in a kind of an unorthodox type of way, but provides you with good dimension and the ability to do this type of flower with having it show all of the sunshine. I got a nice highlight back in through here, making sure that I capture that. And if your white isn't white enough, you can always just let it dry and then add another layer. Sometimes the white can be more translucent than you had anticipated, or it's, you know, taking on some of the colors from the background. So let it dry, and if it doesn't turn out as light as you want, you can either add another layer or darken the areas around it. Because sometimes what happens is you know, when we're painting stuff that's white, we use too much white and we lose the contrast from the objects that are next to it. So if you find that is happening to you and it's, you know, your white, everything just looks white and it looks the same tonal value, then you might have to darken your shadows, or you might have to darken the stuff next to it in order to be able to see it as bright as you want. So this one in through here, this one's getting the lightness on the inside of the petal. It's perhaps catching the light from, you know, up above on the inside of the petal, which is awesome. And then this one's got a little bit, and you can see my gaps are almost gone right now. I've got a couple more showing, but I'll take care of those as well. So just getting this in through here, making sure that I've got everywhere covered that I need to. Maybe this one's got a little bit up in through here. And then I would just kind of sit and fiddle with it. If I felt like I needed any more darkness, I could certainly bring in a little bit darker shade of my tan. Like I just took my tan and added a touch of black to it. So you could certainly, if you felt, especially down in this bottom area, if you felt that you needed to amp up that shadow a little bit, feel free, just make it a little bit darker. There's no rules against that. Just bring it into whatever intensity really works for you visually. And then once you've got it all done, fiddle with it as much as you want. We're going to be using our small brush for the next step. So you can just take this medium brush, put it away, take out your small brush, and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're going to be adding all the color to the flower. I'm going to be using my small brush. I'm going to be using a bunch of colors. I'm going to be using orange, yellow, white, brown, magenta, and green. And if I feel that I need to use any other colors, I certainly will do that, and I'll let you know. So what I'm going to first do is I'm going to start adding the center area to the flower with all the, I think they're called stamens, all the little squiggly things that are going to be up in the center. So I'm going to start with orange paint, and I'm going to have it behind these two petals, kind of tucked in between there. So just a little bit of orange paint on my brush is going to get this the area in which I want it. So I'm just kind of going right around here, going to give myself a whole bunch of little squiggly type of pieces just popping up behind here. I'll be adding some yellow and some other colors to it in a minute, but I just want to start with this orange so I have a nice base underneath. So just orange on my brush right now, giving myself a whole bunch of little squiggly marks. Maybe we've got a big rogue one over here, and then as I come down towards this little area, I will just maybe have a couple coming out, maybe a little short one in through here, and then maybe a couple on the side over here as if they're just kind of sticking out from the center. And feel free to make yours look whatever way you want. Yours don't have to be in the same formation as mine. This is just how I want to do it. So you can have yours whatever way you want. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to wash and dry my brush. While that's drying, I'm going to go and put my colored parts on my petals. So these type of flowers can come white, pink, purple. You can make them all different kinds of colors. I'm just going to go for a nice transition from a magenta color down at the bottom to the white petals on the edges. I did notice that on this particular colored variety of this flower, that some of the tips of the outside petals have a little bit of green on them. So I'm going to put a little bit of green on them. I just picked up some green oxide. I'm going to rub in a little bit of green on the bottom side of this petal. That was that little popped up piece that we put. I'm going to put a little bit of green over on the edge of this one. So I just do a little line and then just kind of pull it out to the right and to the left, giving myself a little bit of that green essence. I'm going to put a tiny bit over on the edges of these petals, back in through here, and I'm just using my green oxide and just kind of rubbing it in where I feel it would be represented. Maybe I got a little bit of this tip back here that's got a touch of it on there. You don't even have to do this green color, but I just thought that it added a little bit extra oomph to the realism of it. Now I'm going to wash and dry my brush. I'm going to put some of my magenta on. So I've got my magenta that I'm going to be putting nice and dark right in this the crevice in through here. Actually, I think I'm going to use magenta with a touch of brown right in this this little deep area, the darkest area in through here. So right now I have magenta plus a little bit of brown on my brush, just kind of getting it in this nice rich area down at the bottom where the petals are meeting the center of the flower, making sure that I've got a good nice shadowy part in through there. Now I'm going to pick up just my magenta. I wipe my brush off on my paper towel, and then I'm just picking up a bit of the magenta and going to rub it out so it will kind of fade into the flower itself. And you could certainly pick up a little bit of either white or your tan color to get it to blend out if you want to. But right now, just kind of adding this on in through here. I think I'm going to put a little bit coming up in through here. I think I am going to put a tiny bit of white paint too. I'm going to use magenta plus a little bit of white as I'm getting further away from this base, just so the color is a little bit more delicate looking as it's going into the lighter area of the flower. So something like this. So this was magenta plus a tiny bit of white paint, and I just sit in and I rub it out so it's kind of fading from the dark area up. Maybe I'll put a little bit in through here. So again, just magenta plus a tiny bit of white paint on my brush. You could even use a little bit of water so it's see-through and it sees the color behind it. That will allow it to take on whatever tonal value that you have on that particular petal. So I've got a little bit on my brush now. So again, I've just got a little bit of the magenta and a tiny bit of white and a little bit of water too. So that allows me to rub it out. So again, same combination. I'm going to probably be using the same combination for all of them. Magenta plus a tiny bit of white and a little bit of water. That gets me or allows me to put it where I want, which is that darkest area, and then just kind of rub it out. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the inside of this petal in through here. Just get it on in through there and then just rub it out. Maybe a little bit on the inside of this one too. And if you felt that you wanted it any brighter or darker, you could certainly, you know, just shift it into whatever values that you want. Like I feel this one needs a little bit more kind of finessing, so I just picked up a little bit more of my white and the magenta just to get that to blend out. And then just fiddle with it until you feel that it works out for you. And if you need to go a little bit, just fix, I just want to fix right there, okay? And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to wash and dry my brush, and I'm going to finish my little center area. So washing and dry my brush, I'm going to be using brown first to put a little bit of a shadow area right at the base. So just a teeny tiny bit of brown paint is giving me a little bit of a deep shadow as it's meeting the petal itself, more so down like in these corners, so it looks like they're deeper down in the flower, so something like that. Then I'm gonna wash and dry my brush, and I'm gonna be picking up yellow and white. So yellow and white are on my brush, and I'm going to put a whole bunch of beautiful highlighted little streaks within this area. So I'm not covering up all of my orange. That's definitely being utilized as a nice base coat for me, but the white and the yellow is representing the colors that are more evident in the centers here. Sometimes the centers of these flowers almost appear to be glowing. So if you want, you can take a little bit of that yellow and almost put it outside of the footprint of the orange, and that'll make it almost look like it's kind of glowing. They're just beautiful, beautiful flowers that have kind of a magical appearance to them at times. I just picked up a little bit more white to give a little white vibrant tips on those, and then fiddle with it as much as you want. And when you feel like you're all done, we're going to be using the same small brush for the next step, so you can just get ready. Alright, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're going to finish our dragonfly. I'm going to be using my small brush. The colors I'm using are magenta, black, and white. You could certainly make your dragonfly out to be whatever color you'd like. I'm just doing something that color coordinated with my flower. This is just a, you know, fun colors that I thought would look fantastic on a dragonfly. So you can make yours whatever color you'd like. I have tons of dragonflies near my house, and there's a lot with that aqua teal blue color in them. I was gonna do that, but I felt there was enough blue in the painting, so I went for the magenta. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to be painting the body first, and then we'll be making all the little details with legs and eyes and all that good stuff. So I'm gonna have the body and the head and the tail are all gonna be my magenta color, and then I'm gonna make some highlights and shadows once I get that done. So I've got my magenta on my brush. I'm going to be putting a couple of eyes. So I'm just kind of giving myself one big circle on this right side and then a little kind of crescent on the left side. So that way it looks like we're looking at them from the side. Then the body itself, I'm just going to kind of color in with the magenta. You can bring it right to the head if you want to. The tail as well, just going to kind of color it in with my magenta. You can leave some of that cream color showing if you want, or color it in all the way, whatever works for you. I'm going to show you how to put some fun details on it in a second. So that's going to be my body itself. I'm going to put a little bit of a highlight on it now. So I'm adding white paint to my dirty brush. I'm going to give a little highlight on that top of that eye, little highlight on the top of that eye, and then I'm going to do the same thing down the back. So I'm just going to kind of dot my way down the back, which is going to give me this textural type of effect. So it'll almost make it look like there's like a polka dot type pattern on the tail. You don't have to do this part either, but this is one of those, you know, little aspects that might make it look more dimensional and have some more information to it. So I'm calling it a highlight, but you can consider it to be your decorative element as well. I just picked up a little bit more white going down this tail. I'm making really tiny kind of marks as I'm going down this tail, so they look more intricate, I guess. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to wash and dry my brush. I'm going to give myself a shadow underneath that body. So a teeny tiny bit of black paint on my brush. I don't have to do much. You can even put, I just put a little bit of water on my brush to control the intensity of this black so I don't go too much. I'm going to put it underneath this neck and just kind of blend it up the body of the dragonfly. So now it's got a little bit of dimension to it. I'm going to bring a little bit of this down the tail as well. So just going to make some marks on the bottom side of the tail, little tiny black marks. Again, you don't need to go full on a straight line. Just making these little marks will make it look like it's almost got bumps of sorts going down the back. I definitely want to put some black underneath those eyes as well, or between them. So just an itty bitty bit of black on my brush in through here. I suppose you could pull out a little mouth part if you wanted to, but I'm not a dragonfly expert, so I might not have put that in the right spot, which is all right. And I'm picking up a little bit more magenta. Sorry about that. I feel like I put a little bit too much in through here, so I picked up a little bit of magenta just to blend that out a bit, which looks great now. So now what I'm going to do while this is kind of drying, I'm going to wash and dry my brush. I'm going to put the legs on. The legs are going to come kind of out from underneath or between the head and the body, as well as kind of right at the front of the body. I'm going to be using black, but I'm always going to have a little bit of water on my brush. So this way it makes my paint really thin and easy to control, and I'm allowed to get these nice skinny lines because I used a little bit of water in that paint. So I've made it like an ink consistency. So once I've got the right consistency, you could certainly draw these out if you wanted to, but I'm just going to kind of go for it. I want one to be kind of hanging on to the edge here, so just going to give myself a little bit of a leg hanging on there, and then just kind of give myself the illusion of some other legs. Maybe we've got one kind of coming out in through here. I know they have like little elbow things, and then they have little sensory things on the edges of their legs, but again, I don't know the anatomy perfectly, so I'm just kind of going for maybe 6 legs, I'm thinking might be right. So here's my third one on this side with my little elbow of sorts, bringing it down here, and maybe this one just kind of, I don't know, we see the little piece in through there. I think I need another little, I got one on this back side, so that's 4. We'll just give the essence of a couple more lines, 5 and 6. We'll give the illusion that there's 6 legs. Hopefully that works. And then if you can't see them enough, if they're on top of black on black, you can certainly pick up, I just picked up a little bit of white for this particular leg because I'm losing it. I picked up a little bit of white, and you can put a little highlight on them if the contrast is not good enough and you need it to be brighter. You can certainly put a tiny bit of white paint to make it visible. So I just washed and dried my brush. I'm going to move on to my wings. I'm going to be using a little bit of white paint and just going to give a couple of little highlights, so to make them look like they're twinkling from the sun. So I just put white paint on my brush. I'm going to give a little bit of a highlight over here on the edge, and I'm going to do the same thing to the other top edge in through here. You could certainly just make little sparkly dots going down through it. I want them to look translucent, so I'm not doing much to them at all. I want you to be able to see the edges of them, but I don't want them to, necessarily be a solid color. You could certainly incorporate other colors in these wings if you wanted them to appear to have different colors to them, but what I do have to do is I have to connect them to the back. So I've got the white paint on my brush connecting just these edges to the back and through here. But now I'm gonna wipe my brush off and pick up a tiny bit of black paint in order to give myself these little bit of connectors right in to the back. So I just pulled black paint and I'm really just doing these little bit of streaks from the wings into that back, so the visual connection is there, that they are in fact meeting the back somewhere in through here. And I don't want to overdo it so I don't ruin the detail of the other things that I did. And then I would just fiddle with it until I felt like I've got everything on here that I want. And once you've got it into a place that you want, we are going to be using this same brush for the next step, so you can just wash it and dry it and get ready. All right, so we are on to the final step. This is the final step of every painting, which is to sign it. So I typically sign mine in the bottom left or the bottom right. I'm going to be using my small brush. I'm going bottom left with black paint. So I like to sign mine with my initials, but you could certainly sign yours with your first name or the date or a symbol or whatever you'd like for your identifying mark to be is totally fine. It's your painting. You get to sign it however you'd like. And that's going to conclude this painting. I hope you enjoyed the process. I hope you painted yourself a beautiful flower and dragonfly, and I look forward to painting and sipping with you again sometime.